It is always game day in Cleveland. He is Daryl Ryder. I am Andy Baskin. We are brought to you locally by Smiley One in Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling systems. Daryl has his smiley on. Good job, Daryl. And the reason you're smiley today is because it's time to talk about the NFL draft and where we are. Not a very exciting draft for the Browns. They don't have a first-round pick, thanks to Deshaun Watson. 54, 85, 156, 206, 227, is that right? And 243. Those will be your picks because I know you're keeping score at home. Not. Daryl, thoughts on the draft?
He better not use 227 or 243. Those are my thoughts.
Are those ours or not? I can't
those are the okay. 7th round picks. if you
maybe he was using the Lions picks or something there by mistake.
If you missed the previous podcast, Daryl, not a fan of 7th round draft picks.
Oh, go back and watch it. It was really exciting. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, this is not a draft where the Browns are going to be filling in their roster with guys that are going to step on the field immediately. This is a draft where they're going to be looking to help the team more so next year and the year after that and in future years. And in fact, that is something that Andrew Berry talked about last week at his pre-draft. I can't say anything that reveals much, but I will give you this little chestnut about how we are viewing the approach to the 2024 NFL draft, considering we don't have a first-round pick.
That certainly is a factor because we do like to try and get ahead of our roster planning, but it won't solely direct our draft decisions. I think more generally, like you have a vision of maybe how the board will fall, or probably more likely how you'd like it to fall. It never falls that way, and so you have to be adaptable and flexible. But look, we'll probably be pretty consistent in terms of the positions that we invest high resources into, and certainly will be the case if we don't maybe have a young player behind behind an older veteran, and it's a key spot for us. But like I said, it won't solely direct it, but it definitely is part of it.
So there you go, Andy. As I had been saying, the focus is a big picture focus. Really, I think when you look at 54, yeah, that has a chance to be a need. The 3rd round pick may be another depth need, but the rest of it, as Andrew Berry likes to say, complete lottery tickets. You hope to hit on one of those late round picks, similar to what they did last year with DeJuan Jones, and that's what Berry will be looking for. With those later round picks is just a player that comes out of nowhere that, maybe is actually able to help them here in 2024.
I wish they had a first round pick. You want to can we take a second and just talk about the first round, even though we have nothing to do with it?
Yeah, sure.
All right. I thought it was interesting. There's a guy named Paul Hembo who works for ESPN. He's one of their content people. And he went out and looked at all the contracts, I think, since 2017. And he determined whether a pick positionally was a hit or a miss. Did you see any of this, Daryl?
Yeah.
Fascinating. I thought it was absolutely fascinating.
Our morning show brought up the Baker Mayfield pick.
Okay.
In 2018 and whether or not that was a hit or miss. And I contend it was a hit. I realized that Baker didn't get a second contract with the Browns, right?
Right.
And they did go out and they gave up 6 picks and $230 million for Deshaun Watson. But the reason I view it as a hit for the Browns is I am basing it on team history, which let's be honest about it. First round draft pick history for the Browns outside of like Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett. It's been mostly hot garbage, right? We could spend more time laughing at all the misses they had, and we could spend a ton of time fighting over what was their worst draft ever, right?
Right.
So it's a hit for me because he started more games at quarterback consecutively than anyone since Brian Sipe. He won a playoff game here. He was instrumental in helping change the culture within the locker room and within the organization. They did start to win. You know what I mean? Like, he's the guy that was on the field when they ended that losing streak. or I'm sorry, not losing the winless streak. They tied. That's in 2018. They started the season with that tie against the Steelers, but he ended that winless streak when he had to come on for Tyrod Taylor. So yeah, no, he wasn't Josh Allen. No, he wasn't Lamar Jackson. Hindsight being 2020, one of those two dudes are who the Browns should have picked first overall. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, but I still feel like you can't call Baker a bust just because he didn't get that second contract, because he was instrumental in turning this thing around. He made the playoffs. He won a playoff game. They were this close to getting to the conference championship game with him at quarterback. And what really derailed his career here in Cleveland was injury. It wasn't, granted, the performance was a part of it, but the performance suffered because so I'm not willing to sit here and say that Baker Mayfield was a bust.
No, I'm not either. But just going back to that Hembo graphic, that, you know, and by his terms, Mayfield would have been a miss, not a bust, a miss, because he didn't sign his second contract with the Browns. I just thought it was interesting to look at it by position. Now, center is almost a slam dunk, but there's only been 12 since, I think, 2017. So 92% of those guys have come around for a second contract. That's why I just think it's interesting to look at this thing and go, you know, even if your 54th pick is your first pick, I wonder, you know, positionally what makes sense. I just, after looking through this, I just think that maybe, you know, unless it's a 100% slam dunk kind of player where I think everyone in the world knows it's done deal, I don't know that it's worth drafting a quarterback or maybe even a wide receiver in the first round. I would go offensive line all day long, because when you look at even your worst case scenario, it's almost like playing roulette, right? A guard is 50-50. Are you going to play black or are you going to play red? And so you're 50-50 on a guard. The only positions that are above 50% on a hit to get that second contract: guard, tackle, center. Then you drop back into the 40s. Linebacker is a 48% guy. Quarterback is a 50-50 if you do it in the first round, 46%. Edge rusher, 44. Defensive tackle, 40. Then you get the ones that go into the tank, mostly defensive secondary guys. Corner, well, running back, safety, tight end, and wide receiver. So maybe two of the five are DBs. But the cornerback is 38. The running back is 38. Safety is 34. Tight end is 33. And wide receiver is absolutely the worst player you can pick in the first round based on trying to get to that second contract. That is 27%. And we sit here and we talk about the Browns, and I hear a lot of people say, go out and get another wide receiver.
Well, yeah, and so let's look at some of the.
Now, that's based on first round. I know we have a second round pick.
Right. So let's look at something recent. And we're going to keep this recent. We're not going to go all the way back to 99. That's too far.
Right. That was
Greg Newsome, first round pick in 2021. From my view, I think that's a hit. I think they need to pick up that fifth-year option. I feel like they should extend him. Obviously, Greg has to be happy with his role here. That ultimately is a part of it. Andrew Berry's first-round pick, Jed Wills. I would not extend him. I just don't think he's played at a level where he's worthy of significant left tackle money in a contract extension. So that's to your point about, you know, tackles, you know, you want to pick offensive linemen in the first round. You know, Jed hasn't been a bust. He just hasn't been consistent enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
He just, that's the issue there. Denzel Ward in 2018 hit, you know, multi-time Pro Bowler. I think Baker Mayfield was not a bust or was not a miss. I'll disagree with that. We already talked about that. 2017, this was a you know, pretty decent first round for the Browns. They had 3 picks. In my view, they nailed 2 of them. Myles Garrett, first overall, and then David Njoku with the 29th overall pick, sandwiched in there. They picked Jabril Peppers, who was included in the Odell Beckham Jr.
Right.
If my memory serves me correct.
That is correct. He's now saying if he was playing equidistant that he did in Cleveland, where he would stand in Lake Erie to make plays, he'd be standing in the Atlantic Ocean,
right?
In New York on the same deal. Daryl, I like
real quick. I want to wrap. Yeah. You mentioned wide receiver,
right? Well,
Browns did draft a receiver in 2016 in the first round, Corey Coleman. That did not go well.
It didn't. All right, let's talk more about what the Browns are going to do, the picks they have, what they have going on, and we'll hear more from Andrew Berry. It's always game day in Cleveland.
It probably starts Thursday night, and where you kind of re-strategize a little bit based on what's happened on Thursday. But in reality, you probably get a more narrow focus, maybe 10, call it 10 picks out, because that's when really players become, I guess, more in striking distance, so to speak. Time will tell. I think that there are a variety of ways to build, to build a team. I think, right, we saw, I think the Rams this week, if they keep their first round pick, it's the first round pick that they'll have in the Sean McVay era. And I also think the reality of the first round picks, like the league rate hit rate, it's like 50%. They're lottery tickets. They're good lottery tickets at the end of the day, and highly, highly valuable. But even if you have a first round pick, it's certainly not a certain thing. So I think maybe having a level of realism in terms of what can be achieved with your pool of resources or your assets. That's really part of it. But we've been pretty systematic in terms of how we were going to deploy our our picks, our dollars, how we were going to manufacture picks to make it up with volume. So we feel pretty good about where the roster sits today. And but look, we are looking forward to having one back next year for sure. Look, you want as many high picks as possible. I wouldn't say that I miss it on like Thursday or Friday night. I'm probably more focused on the players we can acquire. And they're not necessarily the end-all be-all. They're a great resource to have, but how you can deploy them can be in a variety of ways. It's obviously less flexible than if you have your full slate of picks, but that doesn't mean that you can't manage your resources creatively to, whether it's increase the volume or increase the quality. So a large part of it will depend on what's available and what dance partners we may or may not have. Where it's probably been most different, it's just been a slower Thursday night. But in terms of how we think about building the board or how we think about evaluating prospects or managing our picks, that really hasn't fundamentally changed. I understand that from an external perspective because those are usually the most well-recognized prospects, coming into the draft. But we're excited about maximizing the group of players that we can acquire during the weekend, and there's still a number of good players up and down the draft board.
Well, that was Andrew Barry talking about this upcoming draft, and he's Daryl Ryder. I'm Andy Baskin. This is It's Always Game Day in Cleveland, brought to you locally by Smiley One and Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling solution. He talks about that perspective that he has, Daryl, and when I think about his perspective, there are two things that he's said over the last couple months. One, it also comes down to looking at every draft like they're an expansion team. And two, in this year's draft, he's really not going to, kind of bear down until he sees pick 44, which means he's 10 picks away from his pick.
Yeah. And that tells you that Thursday night we can all watch the Cavaliers game 3 against the Orlando Magic, right? And then when the first round's over, maybe take a peek and see what the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Ravens were able to do with their first round picks. But yeah, I and we've talked about this a lot. They're not going to be looking for starting players immediately. That's not to say that they can't get starting players in this draft with the 6 picks that they have, right? But they're not drafting for an immediate need. They're drafting for depth. And that's where, from my view, you're in the catbird seat as a general manager, is when you're just able to pick for depth and the best player that you think's available. You're not sitting there sweating like, man, need another wide receiver. Got to have another tight end here. Have to do this.
Your job isn't on the line draft night. It's
right.
Not. Or draft weekend.
Right. And it's okay that come August, at the end of August, I should say, you can cut a couple of these guys, get them through waivers, and have them on the practice squad, right? So then you really develop your process of developing these players within your program, which is, that's what the good teams do, because the Browns aren't going to be able to keep everybody. I mean, Greg Newsom's a big issue in the future. Depending on how Nick Chubb is able to come back, he's scheduled to be a free agent next spring as well. They've got a couple other guys that are going to be free agents. You can't always keep everybody. We saw the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, God, they got rid of Tyreek Hill. Think about that for a second. They got rid of Tyreek Hill, their prolific wide receiver, and they still won the damn Super Bowl. Right? And what was the number one thing? Like you and Jeff Phelps would have loved to be hosting in Kansas City last season, because every week you could have spent every show bitching about their wide receiver core and how.
Daryl, let's get this clear though. I'm not the one complaining about the wide receiving core. Jeff just wants a wide receiver. He constantly does. And if you go back, the only time that I was all in on what he was saying was with it wasn't Ray Farmer. It was why am I forgetting?
Ray Farmer hated wide receivers. Remember that? Like, he just didn't think wide receivers were important. Which
was he the one? Was it Ray that always wanted a wide receiver that was under 6 foot?
No, Ray was the one that was just like, yeah, I really am not all that concerned about wide receivers. By the way, speaking of receivers, remember the great second round of I think it was the 2010 draft, maybe? No, the 2009 draft. I'm sorry, I had to look it up.
Okay.
They drafted in the second round. Oh, this would have been Jeff Phelps' dream.
Muhammad Massaquoi, that's his draft, isn't it?
And Brian Robisky.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be the 1-2 combination, and they both washed out rather quickly.
They did get Alex Mack that year and couldn't hang on to him.
Did. Well, Alex didn't. Alex, I think, got tired of Cleveland and all the losing.
Could you blame him?
And he couldn't get out of here fast enough. Remember, the Jaguars signed him to that offer sheet, and he was like, he put on the happy face, but he was so disappointed that the Browns matched it, and he had to stay here like 2 more years. And then as soon as he was able to exercise the opt out, like, he couldn't exercise that thing fast enough so he could get out of here, and he ended up down in Atlanta. But
I remember when Billy Wynn was going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to this team.
Look, the Browns do a really good job drafting offensive linemen historically. I know, Jed Wills, I've mentioned how I feel like he's just too inconsistent, but like Joel Bitonio, 2nd round pick, Joe Thomas, Hall of Famer, Alex Mack, right? I think with a little more longevity in his career, I think he could be in the conversation for being a Hall of Famer. He was really, really good, an elite player at his position. So like the Browns do really well for the most part, drafting offensive linemen. And guess what they need to do this over the next couple of days, Andy?
Get some offensive linemen.
They could use a young offensive lineman.
I would tell you my priority on this one, I think, is linebacker. I just kind of feel like I want them to grab another linebacker, especially with that 2nd round pick. If there's a top quality, and I think the way this draft is going to push back with having all of those quarterbacks up front and having all those wide receivers. I think
7 quarterbacks taken in the 1st round. Are you kidding me?
Well, that's good for us as we sit there at 54 and try to grab a viable linebacker, a viable backup offensive lineman, somebody that can help this team.
I feel like the teams are going to be reaching with this quarterback class a little bit. I think that we're going to fast forward 4 years, I should say, down the line. And this class is not going to be as strong as they're making this class out to be. That's just my fear. Mm-hmm. And my spidey sense tingling there. I don't think this quarterback class is going to live up to the hype. I hope Caleb Williams does. He's going to go number 1 overall. And by the way,
Daryl Tinactin will take care of that spider sense. Keep going. Yes.
It really bothers me because I saw this. I forget the reporter that put it out there. It really bothers me when anonymous NFL executives say really awful things about prospects.
Oh, you know what drives me nuts?
And
the Wonderlic test when that gets released, because I think it's complete garbage.
I'm talking about anonymous execs like Caleb Williams now is being accused of having a Russell Wilson type of persona that's rubbing teams the wrong way.
Sure.
You know what? If you got something bad to say about a kid, put your name to it.
The anonymous stuff is ridiculous. Yeah, I agree.
I think it's beyond. I don't want to say childish.
No, it's just, is it ethical to put something out there like that? I mean, without putting your name on it, I question the ethics on it.
I think you're I'm going to do this PG. I think it makes you a jerk, and I think it makes you a wuss.
Okay.
that you don't put your name on it, but you're going to put something out there like that about a kid coming out just so you can take a shot at him. I think it's
And maybe help him drop a little bit in the draft so you can get him. Let's be honest, that's where a lot of that stuff is coming from.
and look, I don't fault the reporter for getting the information out there.
No, I don't
because
either.
that's the job, to get the information. But if you're gonna just totally try and torpedo a guy like that, have the balls to put your name on it.
Bingo. He's Daryl Ryder. I am Andy Baskin. It's always game day in Cleveland. We'll come back. We'll talk more about the draft. And, Browns fans, see what's going up in Chicago? Is that what's supposed to be going up in Cleveland? We'll talk about it next. It is always game day in Cleveland. He is still Daryl Ryder. I am still Andy Baskin. We are brought to you locally by Bryant and, of course, our good friends at Smiley One. It's Smiley One and Bryant. Daryl Ryder.
It says it right there.
In case you were wondering, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're
It's
listening,
still there.
You sure?
Yeah, it's still there.
Just want to make sure.
I'll be
Go-
sure to check my driver's license after, just to make sure that it's still my name.
Yeah, I know you're going to pull your driver's license out. Bryant and Smiley One, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling solution. All right, so Daryl, just tell me, priority-wise, what do you want the Browns to do during the draft? Day 2.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think linebacker and defensive tackle are your top 2 priorities. I'll take either, no particular order there, but I'd like to see the 2nd and 3rd round picks used on those 2 positions. I feel like they need to address tight end, add a little depth there. I'm okay if you want to take a flyer on a wide receiver down the line. Fine.
Cade Stover, would you be good with Cade Stover from Ohio State?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
I like him.
But yeah, and then 2, I think that you might end up needing to draft another corner if you're thinking about not being able to retain Greg Newsome. Because again, with the new kickoff rules and things like that, you're going to need corners to be able to chase people down on these returns. So yeah, I think that the trenches, very important, linebacker, very important, receiver, corner. Trade those 2 7th round picks. And if all that happens, then maybe Andrew Berry gets my Executive of the Year award back.
Can I ask you a really silly question?
Sure.
Let's just say something bizarre happens and that one of those quarterbacks is still sticking around. Not that with the Browns. Let's just say one of those quarterbacks is at
54?
30 something, and you think you have the ammo to move up. 39, 40.
Well, remember, he doesn't start thinking until 54. That's what Barry said. Now,
okay, at 44. You mean 44.
Right. But in defense of Andrew, what do I always say? Sound bites in press conferences are not sworn testimony.
That's true.
So even though he says, yeah, when it gets about 44, that's when I'm going to be thinking about what I can do, moving up and down, who's going to be available, whatever. It's Andrew Berry. Nobody likes to wheel and deal more than Andrew Berry does. So you're really going to throw the quarterback thing at me, aren't you?
I'm just saying, if it's sitting there.
I feel all of a sudden like I'm back on the morning show, because
I'm not trying to be the morning show. I'm trying to be, it's always game day in Cleveland. And your name still is Daryl Ryder.
It is. It says it right there. But this is what they do to me.
I know.
Yeah, I don't. I understand why you think that way. I just
wonder if down the road, if you're looking, I think they're in a good spot if they wanted to. If one of those guys dropped into the 2nd round, or even where they are at 54, why wouldn't you draft a quarterback that you can put on the bench for a year?
You know what? Well, then you have to cut DTR because you can't keep him.
I don't know. Is DTR going to be on the injured reserve all year?
Possibly. Maybe that's how you do keep him.
I mean, if you think he's going to be on the injured reserve, and let's just say one of these guys falls hard, ends up, I don't know. You never know when a guy is going to get high and put a bong mask on, right? and start falling in the draft. I mean, that happens all the time. And by the way, did he not turn out to be one of the best players in the NFL right now?
He
right?
did.
So, what a gift. What a gift that was. So maybe we can get one of these great quarterbacks to put a bong mask on and start getting high so we can get him to drop back to 54.
Oh, God. Yeah, but it's legal in a lot of states now.
Well, but it's just the look. It's more about the look than the legality of it, right? So I'm just saying, and then you can have a quarterback.
When that happened, it wasn't mainstream legal.
No,
Well,
I know. But my point is, doesn't this take you to where like the Packers are right now, where they feel like they can have a great quarterback, bring a quarterback in, let them sit for a couple years, and then when it's their turn to blossom, it's their turn to blossom.
Here's when they do it. It's not this year.
Next year?
It's next year.
Okay.
Because next year, here's what the Browns have at their disposal.
Daryl, you're saying simmer down, Andy. Simmer down.
They have their first, their second, their third, their fourth, and their sixth round picks. The Browns, okay? They acquired 2 additional 6th round picks, one from Minnesota, one from Detroit, and also a 7th round pick from Minnesota as well. So they have 5 of their first 6 native selections at their disposal next year. And so I think because you're going to have one more year of information on Deshaun Watson, big year for him, right? This will be the pivotal year. You'll have that information. And then, if you draft the quarterback next year, now you have 2 years to get him ready to play. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
That's assuming Deshaun does not.
Daryl, did you see the balloons just flying for your face?
I did. I guess we're celebrating something. Right. Apparently, we're celebrating just how spot on take is of this.
I've never seen that before.
Me neither. Is it?
Did you just text someone a happy birthday? That's what it looked like.
No, I put my do not disturb on my phone. I have the do not because my phone pinged at the start of the podcast.
Now I want to send you a happy birthday text.
Well,
all right,
but
we're cleared up on the quarterback thing. All right, Daryl, before we take off, I want to talk about this. And by the way, unhappy birthday to you if it's your unhappy birthday. Chicago is now ready to put a new stadium in. And I can only imagine what it felt like in Berea when they saw the plans for that thing. They're saying $2 billion for a dome stadium. I heard reports $3 billion. Help me.
Well, it's going to be between $2.5 and $3 billion for the Browns dome.
Gotcha.
The Bears dome itself is going to cost around 3.3 billion. And then with the infrastructure around it, it takes the cost to around 4.2 billion.
Well, they got to get the L to it. The good thing about us is if we went to Brooklyn, the Rapids right there.
You mean Brook Park?
Brook Park, yeah, Brooklyn, sorry.
Brooklyn's by downtown. Closer to downtown.
But it's its own entity too. It's the suburbs. It's almost just as far away.
Stop. I'll just say this. When those renderings came out.
Brook Park, Egypt.
And
Brooklyn, China. Because that's how far it is. So you're moving the team to China.
I thought you were going to say Brooklyn, New York.
No, that's too close. That's too close. It's only 500 miles away.
Can I just remind people that the New York Jets and the New York Giants play football in New Jersey? So shut the hell up about them possibly going to Brook Park, okay? Brook Park is literally across the street from the city of Cleveland.
You can throw a rock from Brook Park to Cleveland.
Correct. So
actually,
anyway.
You kick a rock, probably.
I'm going to take you inside Berea. When those renderings came out that the Bears released of what they would like to build just south of
yes, with this. Oh my God, those are our plans.
Me want one. Me likey lots. Please, pretty please. Me want dome. Translucent roof. Yes. That's what the Browns were thinking when they saw those renderings come out. They want one of those. That's what they want. They want a building like that. That's going to be able to host Final Fours, that can host the Super Bowl, that can host college football playoffs. And look,
and everybody's happy because they're building this next to the old stadium and they're not going out to some old racetrack, right?
Right. And again,
so can they do that here?
The Bears spent a couple $100 million, by the way, for that land in Arlington Heights. It was not cheap what the Bears, I'll tell you, because I have a running stadium spreadsheet. A cost analysis spreadsheet going. And so the Bears, I'll give you the exact number. The Bears bought 386 acres in Arlington Heights for $197 million. And yeah, they're not going to build on that. Oh, by the way, $589 million is still owed for the existing Soldier Field rebuild. That's not supposed to be paid off until 2032.
Oh, it's the worst stadium to
Now,
get around.
here's
It's so hard to get around that
I know.
stadium.
Here's the good news for the Browns. The Browns stadium will be paid off on time in 2028. I believe that there's like $40 to $45 million in debt that is still owed on that building, but that will be paid off. The Browns will not be, if the Browns move to Brook Park, they will not be leaving the city of Cleveland with a massive stadium debt.
Gotcha.
It'll be paid for.
Although the city can always get a home equity loan on it.
The funny thing, the city, you joke about that, Andy. The city's been trying to get an insurance for that stadium for the last couple of years. It's been in the city council queue that they're seeking bids or whatever their thing
For
is.
insurance, yeah.
For insurance for that building. But yeah, so when those renderings came out, oh yeah, the Browns, I think, became instantly jealous and they started salivating at the thought of building their own dome in Brook Park.
But some of their issues are settled because it's in Chicago. They're going to build it right next to where the old. I wish they could just do that here, and we could just get through all this. It'd be a lot easier. I still don't have a problem with them putting it in Brook Park, though. So that's just me. Daryl, you choked me up here.
You are so excited about the prospect of the Browns building the dome. You're all choked up over it. And now you have to chug some Red Bull or whatever it is that you're.
It's ginger ale.
Ginger ale.
We're done, aren't we? We're done for today. It's always good to be done.
I think we covered everything.
He is Daryl Ryder. I am Andy Baskin. Evan O'Brien, who's our outstanding producer. Man, great job. Everything's been going off to a roaring start to get things going here. Wouldn't you say, Daryl?
I completely agree. I second that motion since we're in the whole space of legal and city stuff. Yeah.
Again, we want to let everybody know there's a major change coming to this podcast. We'll tell you so down the road, right?
Once we get from the powers that be, we'll have a major announcement. Yes.
Now I know where the balloons are coming from. I now know where they're coming because you just got a thumbs up. All right. It's always game day in Cleveland. Thanks for watching and listening.